Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University, Dr. Nareswara Nugroho, the Honorable Head of Department of Forest Resources Conservation and Ecotourism, Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University, Dr. Nyoto Santoso, distinguished international and national speakers, and all respected participants. Good morning, everyone. We are delighted to welcome you in this international webinar. To open this webinar, let's say Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let me introduce myself. I am Kamila Nurdini Tarwana. You can call me Kamila. I am a Forest Resources Conservation and Ecotourism student, and it is such an honor for me to be the master of ceremony on today's international webinar entitled Biodiversity Crisis and Innovation 4.0 in Pandemic Era. This webinar is organized by Department of Forest Resources Conservation and Ecotourism, Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. There are 7 agenda on this special event. First is committee report that will be delivered by Head of Department of Forest Resources Conservation and Ecotourism, Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. Second is welcoming speech from Dean of Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. Third is photo session. Fourth is speaker session, which involve 4 outstanding speakers from university, research institution, non-governmental organizations, and practitioners with various fields related to the theme. Fifth is discussion. This session, along with the previous session, will be guided by our distinguished moderator, Professor Ani Madiastuti. Sixth is appreciation, and the last but not least is door prize announcement and closing. Before we move on to the next agenda, allow me to read the rules you must comply today. First, participants are expected to always mute the microphone during the webinar, except it is necessary to talk. Second, whenever possible, participants are expected to always use the virtual background provided by the committee. Third, participants are expected to always activate the camera during the webinar. However, if there is any connection problem, you can turn off the camera. Fourth, during the discussion session, you can write your question through chat room, and don't forget to mention to whom your question is asked. Fifth, don't forget to fill in the proof of attendance form as the requirement for the e-certificate of today's international webinar, and the link that will be sent by the committee at the end of this webinar. The last, kindly stay and focus on the webinar because in the end of the session, there will be a door prize announcement for the participant who actively participate. The winner who doesn't present in this Zoom will automatically be replaced by other winner. So just stay tuned here. All right. Without any further ado, let's proceed to the first agenda, which is a committee report that will be delivered by Head of Department of Forest Resources Conservation and Ecotourism, Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University, Dr. Nyoto Santoso. Time is yours.
Thank you, Camila. Honorable Dean, Vice Dean, Head of Division of Forest Resource Conservation and Ecotourism, Department of the Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. Distinguished research person and speaker, one, Professor Amel Borsi from Nanjing Forestry University, China. Second, we and Andias Thomas, Magister Administration from Wildlife Conservation Society Indonesia Program. Third, Dr. Asyani Sungkar from Department of Forest Resource Conservation and Ecotourism, IPB University. Fourth, Valentina Sita Prativi from Magnificus Expedition Indonesia. Professor, lecturer, participant, and committee of this international webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning. First of all, let us praise the patience of the Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for the abundance of His grace and gift, so that this morning we can gather to attend the international webinar. We welcome, appreciate, and thank you for coming to fulfill our invitation to this international webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of the webinar is Biodiversity Crisis and Innovation 4.0 in the Pandemic Era. We chosen the theme because it is in line with the educational program of IPB University, namely Future IPB 4.0 Education. This international webinar activity was also held to support and participate in the 58th years anniversary of IPB. This year, anniversary theme is Agro-Maritime Innovation 4.0 to overcome crisis in the pandemic era. In line with these activities, and our department focus, namely in the field of biodiversity, we raise the theme. The purpose of the holding this activity is intended as a form of the communication and an effort to spread to the broad community about the current biodiversity crisis and how Innovation 4.0 is used to overcome this crisis, especially during the pandemic era. Furthermore, this meeting is expected to be an initial meeting that will further open communication space for many parties involved and actively protect biodiversity in the various parts of the world. The international webinar was held online and the focus discussion facilitated by the Department of Forest Resource Conservation, ABB University. The parties will actively provide material and opinion both in writing and orally. We would like to thank the resource person for their willingness to share their knowledge and experience in this international webinar. Finally, we would like to thank the Nanjing Forestry University, China, Wildlife Conservation Society Indonesia Program, Pacificus Expedition Indonesia, and the organizing committee for their excellent effort and support in the organizing this webinar. We wish all of you a productive and fruitful meeting. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Nyoto Santoso, for the report. Next, we will be hearing a welcoming speech from Dean of Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. Dr. Nareswara Nugroho, time is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Camilla. I think my voice is clear?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Head of Forest Resources Conservation and Ecotourism Department, Secretary of Department, Head of Division of Department of the Forest Resource Conservation and Ecotourism in Faculty of Forestry and Environment IPB University, distinguished resource persons, Professor Amael Borsi from Nanjing Forestry University, China, Bapak Dwi and Adianto MA from Wildlife Conservation Society Indonesia Programs, Ibu Dr. Arsiana Sungkar from Department of Forest Resource Conservation and Ecotourism, Faculty of Forestry IPB University, and also Ibu Valentina Sinta Prativi from Magnificus Expedition Indonesia, and Professor Ani Mardiasuti from Department of Forest Resource Conservation and Tourism, and become our moderator. And also distinguished guests, professor, lecturers, participants, and committee of these international webinars. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, good morning to everybody. Alhamdulillah, praise over the presence of God Almighty, because on this day we can be present and gather today. I feel very happy meeting you here in good conditions, even though not directly meet face to face, but through this Zoom cloud meeting platform. This pandemic is becoming a constraint factor in our normal life, so please stay safe and healthy wherever you are. Firstly, please extend our warm welcome to all honorable distinguished resource persons and participants of Biodiversity Crisis and Innovation 4.0 in Pandemic Era webinars. This international webinar was held in commemoration of the IPB's 58th Dies Natalis. IPB University was established on September 1st, 1963, and is the only agriculture-based university in Indonesia. IPB University has grown and developed into a good college and plays a vital role in Indonesian national developments and higher education. Currently, IPB has 9 faculties and 24 research centers, with research focusing on food, energy, environment, poverty alleviations, and biomedicines. Recent QS World University ranking by subject in agriculture and forestry has placed IPB in the top 62 universities in the world. It is the best university for in 2019 new coronavirus disease or called by COVID-19 pandemic has caused various changes and problems on this earth, including issues in biodiversity. However, significant the human tragedy surrounding the pandemic, the glaring blind spot is the ecological impact of the pandemic and the lockdown caused by the pandemic. Scientific reports on the effect of the pandemic on conservation issues are minuscule compared to information on the social, economic, political, and health-related consequences. Yet, we also recognize that biodiversity underpins current and future human health, well-being, and prosperity. Therefore, holding this webinar is expected to further broaden our understanding and awareness of our biodiversity. In addition, with the coronavirus pandemic COVID-19, such as applications in technology, initiative, and one aspect is that developing very quickly to be able to adapt to changing conditions. Therefore, we must also integrate 4.0 innovation with the management and overcoming of problems that occur in our biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, the Faculty of Forestry and Environment IPB is a part of the big family in IPB. It has a mission to organize educational and communicative service activity to advance science and methodology in sustainable forests and environmental to progress and welfare of the nations. To progress and welfare of the nations and to develop along the development of problems related to the part of the forest. It is the part of the forest and environmental. Therefore, along with the development of problems related to biodiversity, which is part of the forest and environmental resources, we must participate in its management to remain sustainable. This webinar is held as one of the efforts to achieve these missions. Finally, we would like to thank the Nanjing Forestry University China Wildlife Conservation Society's Indonesia Program and Magnificus Expeditions Indonesia and the organizing committee coordinated by the head of Forest Resource Conservation and Ecotourism Department, Faculty of Forestry and Environment IPB University, for their excellent effort and support in organizing this webinar. We wish all of you a productive and fruitful meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, by saying Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially open this international webinar. Sincerely hope the meeting is a great success. Thank you. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Nareswara Nugroho, for the welcoming speech. Before we proceed to the next agenda, let's have some photo session first. For all of the participants, kindly open your camera and give the best smile. There is 9 slides here, so Kindly hold your smile because we don't know where is our position, right? Okay, I will count from 3 to 1 for each slide. Okay, for the first slide, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, for the second slide, 3, 2, 1, cheese. For the third slide, all right, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, for the fourth slide, 3, 2, 1, cheese. Okay, now for the fifth slide, 3, 2, 1, cheese. All right, for the sixth slide, maybe it's just a quick session for the sixth slide because, all right, sixth slide. For the seventh slide, for the eighth slide, and finally, we came to the last slide. All right. Thank you, everyone. Okay. After this photo session, now we will come to our main agenda, which is the agenda we are waiting for. We will proceed to our main agenda, which is the speaker session. But before that, let me introduce our moderator first by briefly read the CV of Professor Ani Mardiastuti. Professor Ani is a lecturer in IPB University. Her expertise is in wildlife ecology, specifically for birds. Now, she is a head division of wildlife ecology and management, Department of Forest Resources, Conservation and Ecotourism, Faculty of Forestry and Environment, IPB University. She is also founder and chairperson of board Burung Indonesia from 2002 until now, and member of supervisory board Indonesia Biodiversity Foundation, or called as Yayasan Hayati, from 2019 until now. Wow, what a great person she is, right? Okay, maybe I will greet Professor Ani first. Hello, Professor. How are you today?
Hi, Camila. I'm good. How about you? Thank you for your
great,
nice introduction about me.
You're so great person, Professor. Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe without any longer, okay, maybe speaker session could start. For Professor Ani, time is yours.
Thank you, Camila. Good morning, everybody, distinguished guests, distinguished speakers, and participants, all of you. I'm very honored to be the moderator of today's agenda, today's event. And again, my name is Ani Mardiastuti, and I'm academic staff of IPB University. Today, we will have a lot of various of conservation topics. So be prepared and be alert and be ready to listen and ready to learn about everything, anything. So the first, we will have a discussion about amphibians. And then we also have about wildlife trade. And then also about culture and language. This is something that are very interesting. And then also about ecotourism. So today we will have 4 speakers. And as our time is very limited until noon approximately, let's make the most efficient from it. I will briefly introduce each one of our speakers, starting with the first speaker. Oh, by the way, before I forget, if you have any questions or something to be discussed with each of the speakers, please write it down in the chat box. So because we will not open the discussion directly, so all of the communication will be through the chat box. So just if you have something in your mind, burning question or everything, write it down, okay? So moving on, our first speaker is Dr. Amel, hopefully I'm spell it correctly, Amel Bozi. He is now working with the College of, he is a professor in Nanjing Forestry University in China. So he was in China, but he doesn't look like China because he's not Chinese, I think. And he is a very, very international person. His bachelor is in France, and then his master is from Lausanne, Switzerland. His PhD is from Seoul National University in South Korea. And now, of course, he's working with Nanjing University. So he has a very impressive CV, and maybe it will took me like 2 days if I read everything. So basically, he's a very famous person. He is also a deputy chair for the amphibian specialist group, IUCN SSC. So it's very glad to have you today, Professor Amel Borzi. And
Thank you.
And you have like about, hopefully you can have it in 20 minutes for your speech. Okay, the next 20 minutes will be yours. Over to you, Dr. Borzi.
All right, I'll share my screen.
Yes, please.
Can you confirm that you can see everything?
Not yet, not yet. Yes, it's coming, it's coming. Okay,
right.
Looking good now, go ahead.
All right, so first, thank you very much for the fantastic introduction. This is very nice and much more elogious than I would expect, so thank you so much. So yeah, as explained, I am a professor at Nanjing Forestry University now, and my research focus is on biodiversity conservation with a strong focus on amphibians. The thing is that for conservation in general, we need to think about ecology and biodiversity in broad terms. So I will start the presentation with approaching the wildlife trade, not only for amphibians, but for animal vertebrates in general, and then focus on amphibians. So today the idea is to understand which ecological and legislative innovations are needed to alleviate biodiversity loss during the pandemic. I want to start with something that is very obvious to most of us, but it does need to be repeated. If I'm speaking on Zoom today and not physically present in Bogor, is because of our activities. Human activities have resulted in the pandemic through the spread of COVID-19, and we are the reason why the pandemic is here. Having said that, clearly there are diverse origins possible. The animal reservoirs from which the virus originates are multiples, and we can see that there are other viruses, other pathogens that can originate from a broad range of species. But if these species are not interacting with humans at the interface between wildlife, domestic animals, and humans, then there is no risk of pandemics. And that's the point I'm going to address. How do we decrease this interface? So if we look at it from a more holistic point of view, the wildlife trade is the main point, the main origin. Of course, it is something needed. We are omnivorous. We do need to eat meat. So that's where wildlife is, that's why we need to consume wildlife, and that's why it is traded. The next point, what that is the most important, is that there is an increase in habitat fragmentation. We are encroaching on the environment more and more, meaning that the interface between wildlife, humans, and domestic animals, which are usually the transition steps for viruses and pathogens, is increasing. The probability of being in contact with pathogens is increasing. And then when there's a conversion or fragmentation of the natural habitat, this further increase the habitat fragmentations. We may have some part of the habitats that are still used for wildlife in very broad terms, but that are not a natural environment anymore, and that's also increasing the risk of contact. And the risk of human-wildlife interaction resulting in the transmissions of pathogens. And then the last point is the unregulated markets. So once again, markets are needed. We do need to eat. But the fact is that we eat more than what is nutritious. We eat for a variety of reasons, ranging from the possibility or the potential to eat species that are not necessarily nutritious and are carrying disease. And that's where we have an increase of the interface between wildlife, human activities, and domestic species. And all in all, ecosystem degradation reduces the potential for disease regulations. But if I want to summarize it in a very simple term, is that we basically, if we decrease or if we remove the natural habitat, there is a higher risk of pandemic. So, and I'll further summarize it, is that if we destroy the habitat, if we lose biodiversity, we have a higher risk of further pandemics and getting back to the situation that we are in at the moment. What have we learned from COVID-19? And here, what I mean, we have learned is more from an ecologist or a virologist point of view. It's not necessarily from people legislative that are able to make decisions and that are going to prevent the next pandemic. So protected habitats are requirements to avoid COVID-19 because, to avoid pandemics, because that's where, I mean, protecting habitat is the main way to avoid this type of pandemics. Regulating the wildlife trade and focusing on animal products that are not a risk of pathogens is also one of the important way of decreasing the risk of pandemics. And then rethinking our relationship with the natural world. For now, we exploit natural resources without thinking about, or very few of us think about what's going to happen when we are out of those resources. If we were to think about this is harvesting sustainably, these type of resources can be used, but we can use only this amount within this time period, then we would be able to avoid the next risk of pandemics. And so all of those things are more from a legislative point of view. Laws can be drafted and enforced to try to prevent the next pandemic, and that goes through the preventing the loss of biodiversity. So what can we do? The first one is protect. So it's protect habitat against fragmentation, deforestations. Like for instance, on the little graph on the left, you can see that we have patches of habitat that are disconnected by the white corridors. And this fragmentation is the reason why there is an increase in the interface between wildlife and domestic animals and human activities. If we prevent habitat fragmentation, and that could be through, for instance, making sure that agricultural lands are not within the natural habitats, urbanization does not have tracts going through natural habitat, then we will protect the habitat and prevent the risk of pandemic. We can also regulate. So we eat a lot of things, but do we really necessarily need to eat? And I'm just going to say bats because it seems that COVID-19 is likely to have originated from bats. What about focusing on regulation of the trade towards what we need to eat, what is nutritious? And here the nutritious can be defined from a very broad point of view, but farm species generally have a lower risk of bringing new disease in contact with human activities. And then cover a larger group of species. At the moment, protection, conservation activities are focused on threatened species. I mean, it has a very general point of view, but if you think about species in general, biodiversity in general, all species are declining in number. Those species that are still abundant, that are not threatened yet, but still declining, are not the focus of any conservation activity. However, they're still declining, and they're going to reach the threshold at which it will not be possible to do anything for their protection. And so maybe thinking about protecting things before they become threatened instead of being reactionary and only protecting species that are already threatened would be the right way to go. So what are the key supporting measures for those type of changes? The first one is ecosystem restoration. If we not stop thinking about preventing the loss, but recreating landscapes that are required for biodiversity conservation, we would go one step further in the right directions to protect the environment. And then we need a stronger regulatory basis. Most countries have laws that are somehow adequate for biodiversity protections, more or less. The thing is that they are very rarely implemented. And so maybe making sure that the laws are matching the current situation, because those laws are few decades old in all of the countries, most countries. And so updating laws and enforcing them would be a way to support by the fight against biodiversity loss. And then alternative subsistence. We can see that, for instance, meat consumption is peaking at the moment in all across the world. We are eating more and more meat, but does the human body physiologically need this type of resources? Can we think about a different way of feeding ourselves through products that may not be as detrimental to the environment as it is now? A very easy example is that obesity is rising in many countries. Trying to think about a health problem could also help against biodiversity loss and the risk of pandemics. So the current state worldwide is the top line you can see. So we have an increasing habitat fragmentations and unrelated markets. That's the current status. It was the one before the pandemic, and sadly, it is still pretty much the same at the moment, 2 years in the pandemic. For the future, there are basically two options possible. The first one is business as usual. We have a highly fragmented habitat. We have an increase in fragmentations and unregulated markets where any species can be sold and consumed by humans. That will result in an increase of human-wildlife interactions and an exponentially increasing contact. And that will result in a risk of a higher risk of zoonosis and pandemics, meaning that basically humans are threatening themselves. An alternative for the future approaches would be preventing habitat fragmentation and degradation. So restoring habitat, making sure that wildlife is not impacted by human activities. Regulating subsistence markets. And here it's a crocodile silhouette that is visible. But I do want to say that by regulating the market, I don't mean human eat chicken and that's it. There are other resources that can be used safely and sustainably. And we have to focus on what is really sustainable and what is adequate for human activities. That will result in a decrease in human and wildlife interactions and a decrease in the risk of zoonosis and pandemics. How can we get there? It is indeed a lot of work. For instance, and those ideas are not, have to be implemented at the same time. It's not one or the other. So strict EIAs with mitigation measures, wildlife trade regulations. So we need to see what is possible, what is tradable, what needs to happen, reducing the demands for wildlife products, training staff and best practices. So here, staff can be, for instance, park rangers, as most people will think about right away, but could also be custom officers, learning how to distinguish between species in the international trade and prevent the sale of species that should not be sold or are illegally sold. And then research, analysis, and testing mitigations. Those recommendations are clearly based on words, but we need to do research to understand what really is needed for mitigations of the biodiversity loss. Clearly, all of that requires an increase in fundings and a shift in policy frameworks, which should come from legislations. And that's where it becomes difficult because legislatives do not have the same approach as ecologists or virologists. Okay, so that was a very broad overview for wildlife trade in general. And now I'll be focusing on amphibians. My specialty, maybe being a bit more comfortable with it. The first thing is, what are the risks from amphibians? Amphibians can carry mycobacteria, and there are some are zoonotics, but the risk of becoming pandemic, so touching humans, is extremely low. Amphibians can carry arboviruses that have shown the potential for zoonosis, but in-lab potential does not mean that there is any example of zoonosis from that. So there is a risk for amphibians, but it is extremely low. And amphibians, however, provide vector control for antivertebrates like mosquitoes, flies, and so on. And here I want to show a very clear example. So at the moment, there is a zoonosis for amphibians worldwide. There is more than 100 species that went extinct because of a chytrid fungus coming from Northeast Asia. And we can see that in South America, where there is a huge decrease in amphibian density, there's an increase in malaria, meaning that humans are dying of malaria because of the decrease in amphibian populations. And that's something really critical, because by bringing the the chytrid fungus that is decimating amphibians has been brought by human activities. And through this trade of whichever the way it was introduced, we are impacting our own self. And then amphibians are useful for pest controls. So there is a growing research body, especially in India and Nepal, showing that in agricultural landscapes, and especially for soy and rice, if we have amphibians in the fields, we have a higher yield. So here, clearly, having the presence of amphibians is a way of getting more food for humans and also higher income for farmers. And so here, I just want to diverge a bit from something that Professor Annie asked earlier. Which type of research could be needed in the framework of these 4.0 technological innovations? It could be looking at the impact of amphibians in agricultural environments. And here, maybe we can think about what Professor Gosrini did in the past, looking at how amphibians can be used sustainably for food provisions, but also what is their impact in rice harvest or crop productions. And so that's something that, I mean, most herpetologists like going out and looking for species and just looking at what's available, but maybe looking at how they can benefit human activities is something that would be very interesting. So what has been the impact of trade and human activities on amphibians? There is a very clear historical impact. Most amphibian conceptions a long time ago would have been related to Western Europe and North America. And we can see that there's been a decrease in population densities and even local extirpations for a very large number of species. So clearly, human consumptions have already impacted some species, basically largely in the Northern Hemisphere. What's happening now is that the Northern Hemisphere is importing species from further south, from the tropics, where the population density is still higher, resulting in local extinctions in other areas. So really, amphibian consumption is having a very strong impact on species density and conservation. But what is important to see is that when, especially Europe, started importing amphibians from India, the populations of Hoprobactrachus, the one on top right, crashed. But India, after a few decades, stopped the trade of that species, or those two species in detail, and the populations started rebounding. And now the population size is back to sustainable numbers. And so what it shows is that regulations, here is through the implementation of CITES regulations, does have an impact. We have the tools to protect species. We have the tools to prevent biodiversity loss, but they need to be implemented. And the other risks or threats related to amphibian trade is that we move invasive species around a lot. Here is an image of an American bullfrog that quite common in Boko, if I remember properly. And we see that these species now present in most or on all continents has actually a very strong negative impact on local species because of predation, competition, and carrying diseases such as the chytrid fungus I spoke about earlier. So clearly, when we move a species around through farming, they escape, and then that's when the problems occur. And then I want to speak about the loss of genetic diversity. Here's the example of the giant salamander that is used for human consumption in China. Farms are very numerous, and the species is intensively bred, and in that case, it's meant to be sustainable harvest because it is consumed only from the farms, or it's meant to be at least. The problem is that there have been conservation programs and reintroductions and merging of population and so on. And so out of the 5 species that used to be present in the wild in China, there's now only a hybrid swarm, and we have lost the genetic diversity for each of those populations. We are not able to know where each species was present originally, and the species are basically lost to knowledge at the moment. So what is the amphibian trade doing? Over harvest, we clearly consume and harvest and consume way too many amphibians. We spread invasive species that have a negative impact on the environment. And through this trade, we spread pathogens such as the chytrid fungus that I spoke about earlier, resulting in the extinction of the largest number of species since human records. There is more than 100 species that went extinct because of this chytrid fungus. And so here clearly we see that the amphibian trade is not something that should keep on. But doesn't mean we should ban it, like totally forbid it. yes and no. There are many different approaches. Having restrictions would prevent a lot of losses in biodiversity. And for instance, here we lose a lot of species even before they're described. Pet owners like to have some very fancy newly described species. And because with the new system of publications and preprints, poachers are able to access species and devastate them even before they are officially described. We could also change or modify the meaning of a conservation unit and make it compulsory for a country where the conservation unit is present to protect that conservation unit. It could be, for instance, a population, it could be an endemic species, it could be anything that is bonding the country where it is present, country or region. And that would also limit the pathogen spread, resulting in the death of species. So clearly, restrictions would have a benefit in amphibian conservation. And so actually, that's what happened for a few countries. So here I'm focusing on East Asia mostly because that's where the pandemic originated, but also that's the countries that have taken the strongest steps. And those three examples are touching amphibians, but not only. So in the Republic of Korea now, it is forbidden to import species that are not native, and that touches especially amphibians and reptiles. In Vietnam, it is forbidden to trade species that are not locally present in the environment. In those two cases, it's just a reinforcement of laws that were already present, but are now being enforced. In China, there's been a ban for about 1,000 species from human consumptions. And there is now a list of species that can be consumed by humans, and it's less than 20 species. Everything else is now legally forbidden. Does it mean that they're not consumed? Not necessarily. Does it mean that every species is protected? It does not. But there's an evolution in regulations and their implementation. So we are, in the three examples, on the right way towards biodiversity conservation. So the amphibian trade in details, should we ban it? I mean, just be done with it and then we solve all problems. Some people say, yes, clearly, I mean, why do we need to eat frogs anyways? We can eat chicken, isn't that better? In some ways, yes. In others, no. Because there are some local populations that are relying on frog consumptions for their survival, because it is something they've been doing ancestrally. And in this case, it is something that is generally sustainable. If it's done the right way, if it's done within what's been done for thousands of years, especially within what is now national parks, it could be sustainable. It could be done properly. The problem is that in most cases, people take advantage of it, harvest the amphibians, or it can be brought into any vertebrates and sell them. So clearly we have a problem. Another idea would be to just stop the demand. In that way, there would not be a need to harvest. And here would be mostly countries from the Northern Hemisphere stop importing species. Would that work? It could. Would the countries do it? Well, it needs some new legislations that is not present at the moment. What are the alternatives to those wet markets? Shall we just totally get rid of them? No, because that's how a lot of people eat, and that's something that is needed for human survival. We need to have access to food, but how do we legislate them? What can be done? That's an open question because I don't personally have an answer, but clearly regulating and implementing new legislations would be a way to solve a lot of problems. All right. Thank you very much for listening. I want to say that this presentation was a merging of the project with the IUCN and SSC Amphibian Species Group and the project from the Society for Conservation Biology Asia section. I want to thank Ben for the help with the slides, and I want to thank Dr. Costrini for help with those projects and for inviting me to the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Bozi. Wow, excellent information. And we just learned that amphibians turn out to be closely linked with many others, including health, income. You mentioned about malaria, and then in food production, income, and also trade. So hopefully all of us will learn from your result of your research. Again, thank you very much. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you have questions, just write it down in the chat room. Okay. Speaking about wildlife trade, we have another person who is specializing in wildlife trade. So this is will be very good match with what Professor Amel Bozi have been discussing about. So our second distinguished speaker would be Bapak Dwi Adiasto, a good friend of mine since a long time ago. Selamat pagi, Pak Dwi. Pak Dwi, currently he's a regional counter wildlife trafficking. So there's a counter word over there, not wildlife trafficking, but regional counter wildlife trafficking specialist. And he works with the Wildlife Conservation Society. Graduated from University of Gajah Mada and then continue study in John Jay College of Criminal Justice, City University of New York. So his another background is criminal justice. And as far as I know, the wildlife trade is like embedded in Pak Dwi's DNA. So everywhere I go, he's always talking about wildlife trade, wildlife trade. So I think he is the most expert person in wildlife trade in Indonesia, as far as I know. I think a lot of person will be agree about that because since the beginning, I know him as a wildlife trade specialist until now. So without any other further ado, Pak Dwi, you have the room for the next 20 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Bu Ani. Good morning, all, and it is my pleasure to join in this discussion and also the webinar, important webinar. So today I will try to give a presentation about the wildlife trade in pandemic era, and will be more focused on the illegal wildlife trafficking in Indonesia. So I will try to share my screen. Okay, have you seen the slides, Ibu Aini and all?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I will try to keep this presentation. Maybe some slides will, give you more understanding about the current situation in Indonesia and neighboring countries. So yeah, we understand that for traffickers, I mean the trader, the poachers, intermediary couriers, middlemen, exporters, or buyers, they always think that wildlife is commodity, something good that can be sold and then will give them benefit, earning money from wildlife trafficking, legal and also illegal trafficking. Yeah. So we can see that the traffickers, they are selling live animals and then tiger parts and also wildlife products. You can see like a wallet made from tiger skin, or even we can find many derivative products, yeah, like tiger glue in Thailand. There's so many things happen there in Southeast Asia where we can find many wildlife products, live animals, and then derivative and wildlife parts. And if you think about the complexity of illegal wildlife trafficking, so we can see here that so many various commodities are sold by the traffickers, yeah, and also involving many layers, many levels of traffickers. So there are third party or financial backers, middlemen, courier, exporters, and buyers, or poachers, yeah, and also involving financial flow complexity. So because this huge money there, so in international level, at least 7 to 23 billion US dollar from illegal wildlife trafficking. And from Indonesia itself, the Indonesia Financial Report and Transaction Center, they calculate that the financial transaction from illegal pangolin trafficking reached around 708 million US dollars from pangolin trafficking itself. So this is a huge money there. And because this is involving so many money there, so the traffickers, they try to cover their illegal activity by laundering their money from wildlife trafficking. They use the money from wildlife trafficking to set up the legal business, to set up a shell company, the way to avoid detection from the authorities. And we can see here that actually all of the provinces in Indonesia suffering from poaching and trading, and some of them actually serve as a market for live animal like birds, for example, in Java or some part of southern part of Sumatra. And also Indonesia also market for non-native species. So you know that many like Macau from Latin America, or even there's a case a couple of years ago where 4 lions and 1 jaguar came from Malaysia, goes to Indonesia for market in Indonesia. So we can see that Indonesia actually considered as a source market and a source for wildlife poaching, and also the market for wildlife for buyers. And we try to count the sting operation, the arrest that carried out by various law enforcement agencies in Indonesia since 2003. So I'm working since 2003, so I can track all of the arrests in Indonesia. So we can see here that even in pandemic era in 2021, here we can see that law enforcement officers in Indonesia still continue to conduct law enforcement to arrest the traffickers. So there are 206 sting operations until September this year. And if we calculate all of the sting operations since 2003, there's so many perpetrators already arrested. Around more than 2,400 traffickers were arrested by various authorities, and also involving 394,000 individual animals already confiscated by the government. So we can see that there's a massive numbers here, but again still so many wildlife trafficking there that need to be followed up by the authorities. And if we think about the pandemic era, we can see that the case is still high. We can see high because at least in 2020 we can see there are 214 sting operation, and also 2021 there are 206 sting operation. It's not different compared to the before the era. In 2019 the authorities they have a case 234 sting operation there. And you can see here that the cases, the sting operation also happens in almost all of provinces in Indonesia. So that's why we can say that Indonesia is source market, and also market for wildlife trafficking. From Lampung, the highest province that the authorities they found many smugglings there, and also Jawa Timur, Sumatera Utara, also source of the Jawa Timur serve as a hubs and also market for like songbirds. Sumatera Utara or North Sumatra serve as a source for tigers, elephants, or like marine species. Also they were smuggled from Sumatra seaport like Belawan and also Kuala Namu airport. And many provinces we can see the numbers of sting operation happen there. So we can say that law enforcement officer in Indonesia, they already done their job, the good job to arrest the perpetrators. But again, the situation still continues. The wildlife trafficking still happen there. And Indonesia also, as I mentioned before, that market for you can see here that many countries they serve as buyers, and also the destination for the wildlife trade in Indonesia. So from Malaysia to Latin America, to USA, to Europe, and also to Australia. So they buy animal from Indonesia, both legal and illegally. And if we think about the poaching situation in pandemic era, so I think nothing's different compared to before and after pandemic, because the poachers, they think that there's no physical distance. They go to the forest, to the wildlife habitat, and they just poach. They use many tools, like rifle guns, snares, or other equipments that they don't think about the pandemic, about the coronavirus, because sometimes they just alone go to the forest. Sometimes they make a group, 3 or 4 people go there, and then they just say that we don't have any concern about coronavirus, because we just a small group, and then goes to the forest. There's nothing people there. no people there, and then they got the animals, then just sold to the local suppliers. In North Sulawesi, we found that during the first pandemic time, when the government they conduct like we call it PPKM, in the first time implementation, many of the market actually they close the markets, and it will give impact to the buyers to buy the bushmeat market, the bushmeat. And also there's a consideration from the buyers that they will get the virus not from the wildlife but from other people. So they just worry. They think that the dangerous thing that they will get the virus from people, not from wildlife or zoonosis. So that's why we need to think about how the best strategy in Indonesia to make sure that zoonosis issue awareness, that eating wild animals, bushmeat, will give us more risk to get disease is important to do for now and also in the future. And if we see here about the online trafficking, so I put the Facebook, for example, So I put the data since 2017 to 2021. So you can see here start from the pandemic era in 2019 to 2020. There's a significant increase of group and also accounts, and also advertisement. So you can see the advertisement, the account that's selling protected animal increased significantly before and after pandemic, before and during the pandemic. And if you see the the percentage of advertisement that are advertised from the traffickers, you can see the percentage of traffickers that selling protected animals during the pandemic actually increased more than 600% compared to before the pandemic. So this is the thing that we need to consider, that the traffickers they are now preferring to use online modus operandi, online way to sell, to buy the animals, because you know that during the pandemic there's a travel restrictions, there's a increase of interdiction, like exit point interception. So they consider about that, and then they try to use another modus, like online traffic, online trade, to make sure that there's no direct contact between buyers and sellers. They just use other tools like cargo, something like that. So this is the thing that we need to consider during the pandemic era. And you can see here that in 2019, and also during the pandemic era, the law enforcement for addressing online trade actually decreased, because the officer they also have a problem about like set up a sting operation, set up investigation, because there's a travel restriction, there's a PPKM, difficult to find the buyers or traffickers because they conduct or they implement online modus operandi. So this is the thing that create difficulty for the law enforcement officers to dismantle online trade. So that's why the number of sting operation during the pandemic actually decreased. So you can see here in 2021, there's only 17 sting operation to arrest the online traffickers, compared to 2019 is 42 sting operations. But if you see the number of modus operandi, the way how the traffickers try to sell the wildlife, actually during the pandemic era, the smuggling activities actually increase. This data actually collected by law enforcement activities in Indonesia during the pandemic. So you can see here in the brown color in the top of the graph. So the smuggling actually increased. Even the law enforcement effort actually also addressed that modus operandi. But for trading and transporting actually decreased. Why? Because like I mentioned before, that there's so many exit point interceptions. There's the airport interdiction and also inspection also increased. So that's why during the pandemic since 2020 and right now, there's no one single smuggling effort in the airport because the efficient security or the police or custom, they try to increase their protection in the airport. Also, the number of passengers also decreased significantly. So that's why they prefer to use another modus like using cargo or using online shipment. And also, if we talk about the species that were treated by traffickers, so actually during the pandemic, the birds still, become the biggest numbers of species that were treated by the traffickers. You can see here the birds trade or smuggling, and also buyers still high during the pandemic. And we always hear every week that there's the smuggling of birds from Sumatra to Java or from Kalimantan to Java actually still happens. And it is interestingly that during the pandemic, the species number of non-protected birds actually increased compared to before pandemic. Why? Because the traffickers, they think that if they try to transport non-protected birds, then that's fine. But they don't think that they didn't think that they need to complete their shipment by proposing permit like a transportation permit, or to make sure that the birds that were transported by them actually not came from the protected area, something like that. So that's why so many arrests happen also for non-protected birds, which is actually illegal to be traded, but the trafficker or the trader, they need to ask the permit from the government. And you can see here that the number of species during the pandemic actually increased, quite significant compared to before pandemic, because the trafficker, they think that they try to trade non-protected animals actually fine, it's okay during the pandemic. But they need to consider that they also need to have a permit to poach a non-protected animal, to transport non-protected animal, and also to trade non-protected animal in the market. And from the current cases in Sumatra and also in Kalimantan, we found that the traffickers, they also prefer to use cargo or expedition services, so shipping wildlife without courier, because there's a big risk for them if they shipping wildlife with the courier. Courier means someone that following the animals, So that's why, to make sure that the shipment will be will success to do by them. So they try to some cases they try to bribe the authorities in the exit point for example like seaport or airports. So we found that for example in Sumatra, they just spend 500,000 rupiah for the shipping cost, but they need to bribe around 5 million rupiah for the operators to make sure that they can deliver the animals. So that's why inspecting cargo or expedition services is actually really important for protecting the animal in the source side. And we also identify that some old modus operandi like smuggling frozen pangolins using a document mentioned about the frozen fish, but actually in the frozen container they send tons of pangolin meat also still happens right now. Even we got information from China that they still receive not only pangolin meat but also pangolin scales from Indonesia. And also there's a significant shifting from buying pangolins not only from Asia countries, but for now they're also asking for African pangolin also. So the market for actually still continues for now. And then most of the pangolin actually are smuggled to China or Vietnam as a biggest market for pangolins. And how to make sure that we talk about the government here, the government effort to combat wildlife trafficking, especially online trafficking. So there's one useful tools, important tools to make sure that the officer they have more understanding on criminal network, and also how the traffickers connect to each other. So using digital forensic actually really important for them, for the authorities, where they can confiscate cell phone, they can confiscate the computer from the traffickers, and then they can analyze the data that can be gathered from the smartphone or computers, or even they can conduct a search to their house, so they can find more evidence to make sure that they can have a better understanding on the connection. And these useful tools, software that actually already used by various agencies in Indonesia, so like the police and then custom and even Gakum in MOF, they also use this useful tool to analyze the criminal networks. So these tools actually based on various sources. So the first is the officers, they can gather or collect the data from data digital, for example, like using digital forensic to get the data from cell phone, from internet, or from the computers. And this effort then combined by this research, investigation by the officers, and then they combine all of the data from digital, from field investigation, and this research into data validations, and then using IBM iBase to store all of the data, then they can analyze the data. So this is the way one output that is important for the officers to make sure that they will have a good understanding on who is the key traffickers. For example, like I use tiger trade international level in India. So there are some key traffickers, and also one the most wanted tiger trafficker in India, where they connect to many connection to local level, to local suppliers, or to the buyers in India. So this tool actually will give the officers better way, and also to make them easy to target the next operation to dismantle the networks. So before using these tools, actually they still think that how big the network is. So how to make sure that our effort actually effective to dismantle the whole of the networks. So using these maps, using these tools, actually they can predict their effectiveness, and also they can predict the next step, the next operation that can be done, and also dismantle the wildlife trafficking network, not only in Indonesia but also in international level. I think that's all, Bu Ani. So thank you for your attention, and also please keep more question or suggestion during the discussion. Thank you, Bu.
Thank you, Pak Dwi Adiasto. It seems that it's so difficult to combat the illegal wildlife trade here. Also, lots of effort has been done by your team and also by our government, and it's also, we just learned that apparently COVID-19 has a huge negative impact on wildlife trade. While everybody is at home, they are flourishing themselves and then sell more and more species. So that's good news, and also bad news, of course, for us. Good news is there's a person like Pak Dwi who's been consistently doing this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to write down on the chat if you have questions to Pak Dwi. On the meantime, let us move on to our third speaker. Our third speaker would be Ibu Arziana Sungkar. She is a good friend of mine because she's my colleague in Department of Forest Resource Conservation and Ecotourism. Actually, she was born in Beirut in Lebanon, but of course, she is an Indonesian Indonesian nationalities, but travels a lot. So earlier today, she mentioned that her family has been traveling a lot all over the world. His bachelor is from our university, IPB, and his master's is in another country, in Thailand, Asian Institute of Technology, and her PhD is in another from another country as well, from New Zealand, from University of Auckland. So she would like to share about something about culture and language. Very interesting, I think, because not many persons is dealing with this. So I would like to invite Ibu Arsyana Sungka. Go ahead, Ibu Ina. Her nickname is Ibu Ina. Ibu Ina, go ahead. You have the screen for the next 20 minutes or so. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ani. Let me share the screen first. Okay.
It's coming.
Okay, let me just put it to full screen.
Yes, looking good. Go ahead.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to all of us. Good morning, near noon. Okay, it's mid-morning now. Okay, my presentation today is really about the research that me and my colleagues are doing, and it's currently ongoing as well. It's a 3 years research, but I'm just going to share with all of you our findings so far and why it is important and what's the relations between language and so. So I put my presentations, we call it said with words. Why? Because it's normal. You always say something with words, but some people say it with flowers, say it with a smile, or even say it with diamonds for the girls. But today I'm just going to ask you to say it with words, because we're going to look into biolingual, not bilingual. Okay, it's biolingual. So conserving biodiversity through preserving language. So what is a language? You know, culture. Well, culture influences our values, our traditions, and methods of interactions. And the way we interact with other people is facilitated through the use of language. And Alfred Kroeber, a cultural anthropologist from United States, says that culture started when speech was available. So that's just justify that language is an essential element of culture. It is so essential that there is a phrase that language is culture and culture is language. So when we set language, and this is about biodiversity in crisis, what is the relationship? Let me take you first to look at the facts and the findings of the research in the world. And this is a map by Harman in 1996, and it still applies today as well. It shows you the overlapping of countries with high biodiversity and high cultural diversity. And as you can see here, the green areas, the green countries are in the top 25 for endemic languages. And the yellow are the top 25 for endemic vertebrates. But the red is actually countries top 25 for biocultural diversity, including Indonesia, meaning that Indonesia is rich in both cultural and biodiversity. And this is the table showing you the relationship. And you can see that Indonesia plays among the top 5. If for endemic languages, we have this many. And then for endemic linguistic lineages, and then for endemic high vertebrate species. Well, there are research that says that not all of the areas with high biological diversity is also high in cultural biodiversity. There are some that is not that, but about 70% are actually high diversity, high biodiversity, and high cultural diversity. And this also stated by Jonathan Law in 2014 that places of high diversity, especially tropical forests, have always been known to have high linguistic diversity. So we think that language could be the link in biodiversity conservation. And UNESCO has also stated that this will be the decade of indigenous languages. So UNESCO stated that the local and indigenous communities have elaborated complex classification systems for the natural world, reflecting a deep understanding of their environment. And this environmental knowledge is embedded in indigenous names, oral traditions, and taxonomies, and can be lost when the communities shift to another language. So what UNESCO is underlining here is that it is very important to preserve language in order to preserve biodiversity. So the knowledge of both the language is often seen through the traditional knowledge. So when people have their own traditional knowledge, they rely on the local resources, and they often use local names. And that is why local language is very important for the indigenous people or other traditional people. So this takes us to make an assumption for our research based on that bilingual or multilingual individuals, they use 2 or more languages. And because of that, they can think in both languages and they can see the world better. And they have a better understanding from each side. So for our research, we assume that people who are biolingual would have a greater understanding of the status of their surrounding biodiversity. And this is a chart that is made by my colleague, also a team in this research, where you can see that human beings and the environment, they interact. And these interactions will form a traditional knowledge. And the traditional knowledge will be acquired, accumulated, and will be transmitted. And this can be used for conservations. And in order to convey this, to do this, how traditional knowledge are acquired, accumulated, and transmitted, you need language. And the act for the conservation is just the culture. So what does this have to do with COVID-19 pandemic? Well, for the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone is asked to stay at home. Everyone is asked to look around, look at your backyard, look at your garden, make good use of it. So it allows us to use the local species more. The pandemic also inhibits the connection with elders who do not have Wi-Fi or know how to use a computer. But that is, the problem is not that, but it's important to document what the elders, the knowledge of the elders. And the younger generations can use, they are used to laptop, they are used to digital tools. So we can use the elders to tell us, or we can document their knowledge and share it to the younger generations. So for this COVID-19 pandemic, it gives us an opportunity really to increase the awareness and knowledge on local biodiversity. So Gayo, why do we choose Gayo for our research area? As I said previously, language is a very important cultural identity. And that study suggests that language loss has a negative impact on biodiversity conservation. All of you Indonesian probably heard of the lesser ecosystem and its importance in biodiversity conservation. And the lesser ecosystem is part of the tropical rainforest heritage of Sumatra, which is a natural World Heritage Site. And the area lies mostly on Gayo Highlands. Gayo Highland is also a cultural heritage site through the Samandans. So Gayo is very important for Indonesia because it has both the richness of the nature, the richness of the biodiversity, and also the richness of the culture. And based on the recent archaeological findings, it seems that the Gayo people, the Gayo culture is the oldest culture in Sumatra. The research finding is based on the skeletal remains found in the caves in Mudianosar village in one of the area in Takengon, which is an area in Gayo Highlands. And based on the dating of the skeletons and the area, it seems that it is the oldest. So Gayo culture plays a very important role in Sumatra. However, Gayo is a threatened language. How do we know this? Because the World Ethnologue has done a research and claimed that Gayo is a threatened language. We know that language is the window into heritage, identity, and civilization of culture. And that is why we focus our research on language. And this is just to show that the Gayo people is not concentrated only in the area of highland of Gayo, but we can find them also outside. We can them in Aceh, because this is in the province of Aceh, in Aceh area, but outside the Gayo highland, or even in Jakarta or in Jabodetabek area. Because some of the Gayo people, especially the Gayo people, they have the tendency of going outside their areas to pursue further studies, etc. So it's important also that the language be remain and transmitted in this area, because we've conducted research in this area and we found that the younger generation do not use the Gayo language anymore. They have been replaced with Bahasa Indonesia, even English. So the key to revitalization of Gayo language is it should be learned, it should be taught, and it should be spoken. And we use CLBK, that stands for Culture, Linguistic, Biodiversity, Knowledge, but also in Bahasa Indonesia, it means Cinta Lama Bersemi Kembali. It means that we should, from now on, should love our own culture. And this is what we are planning to produce, hopefully next year, is the Tralavimeter. So it's basically a rapid measurement using medium vocalization automatic speech recognition system to estimate the loss of biodiversity in lesser ecosystems. So basically, we hope to build a tool, a Tralavimeter, that can measure the intonations, the pitch, the speed of speaking of the local words. And whenever we try to test that with other people, with other Gayo, we will know on which meter it stands. Is it a high or average or low? Which will tell us, instead of doing a research that takes a long time, it will tell us that whether they can understand the language or whether they can speak the language. Because for people who use natural resources, who often use their natural resources, they often can speak the names of the species. So these are our research sites. It's a very beautiful area in Gayo. So we conduct our research in 3 different districts, in Gayo Luas, in East Aceh, and in Central Aceh. So just a quick, these are the people. So you can see that this research is conducted not just by me and my 2 colleagues, but we get help from a lot of people, even from the local people, because these people, they explore and try to find the names and try to find the local species. And also we conducted the vegetation analysis. And these are some of the students that we also involve, and they are in charge of free listing team. That means to conduct research on how quick can a person state the names of the food plants. If you are used to it, it's very quick. Like for me, when Ibu Syafitri tested to me, I told her that I'm a Japanese, but I cannot prove that I'm a Japanese because it takes me too long to state just one name of the local food in Japanese. Okay, so what we do is we collect plant specimens and recorded local names. And what we did is we conducted focus group discussion, but I changed the word into focus Gayo discussion. So here we freelist the names of the plants that these elders know. These are the people living in Jabodetabek, and each of them have different backgrounds. So we hope to collect as much as information as we can. And this is just basically some of the things that we can analyze based on our data. This. And then what we are still doing right now is conducting research on the ingredients, the local ingredients that the people use, so that they can enhance the local culinary, they can enhance the pride of their own food. And this is based on the students' activity on field, KKN. They have been able to make a website comprising of the ingredients, the local ingredients, and how to cook it. And also these are the research that our master student is doing right now. It's actually conducting a research on the names of the plants that are used for the local culinary. And then the next thing that we are trying to do is to develop a digital repository. Because when local people use their language more often, they will build up a sense of belonging, of their culture, and enhance self-pride of their identity. So related to the telah meter that I was explaining earlier, we conduct a research on digital repository by documenting language. So as you can see, the surveyor is recording when these local people, the elders, they state the names of the plants. So, and then after that, we put in a website, which can be used by the younger generation, hopefully. So the local names, the scientific names, the Gayo names, and then the species, what it looks like. Because we hope that everybody, not just the Gayo people, but especially the Gayo people, the younger generations, can easily open these Gayo websites and can have understanding more of their local cultures and local plants. And as part of our research, hopefully next year, because next year is our third year of the research, we hope to build this telah meter. So based on the data that we gathered on collecting the names and then also recording, we will build a telah meter. Here, this is actually a part of the bigger research in our faculty. This is just one part because there are other research here. 1, 2, 3. There are other research that are combined together. And our research is just one part that shows how 4.0 or the technology can come in handy to do research. So we assume that the people, if they can still say the words correctly, the intonation, the pitch, the speed of saying the words, that means they still know that the species exists. And hopefully that species will still be available. And this, we think it's an easier way to conduct research in order to know whether the language of Gayo language has been transmitted to younger generations. But of course, this is our hypothesis, so it's not yet tested. But hopefully, we will conduct the research next year, and later on, we will publish the results. So that's all for my presentations. And just because I do this last night, finishing the PowerPoints, I become so poetic. So I just wrote something for the nature that now I understand that through caring and understanding my own language, that I can see and understand the caring and beautiful you. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Wow. Dear nature, that is very beautiful. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it seems that this is another proof that biodiversity is linked to many other topics, including linked with nature, like Ibu Adziana just mentioned, linked with culture, language, yeah. And the extinction is apparently not only to wildlife species, but also, hopefully not, but also to culture and language related to biodiversity. So just continue to, please continue to do the research, Ibu Arziana, because your research is very interesting, and it is, I should say, unusual, but it's very good and beneficial for the future. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, let's move on to the last speakers, last but not least. It's about ecotourism. So we have the fourth speaker is Ibu Sita Pratiwi, Valentina Sita Pratiwi. She is the owner and director and also chief guide for Magnificus Expedition based in Manokwari. But currently, she is in Quebec, Canada. And she is also working with an NGO in Papua. It's called Papua Konservasi dan Komunitas. She is the founder and also program director for that NGO. And she graduated from Faculty of Law. So we have a lawyer with us today, Parahyangan Catholic University. So Ibu Sita, go ahead, you have the floor on the screen, I should say.
Thank you so much, Ibu Ani. It is my honor to be in this forum. I'm very happy to be here with you all. Okay, I think I'm okay here. Okay. Is my presentation showing okay there, Ibu?
Yes, go ahead, yes.
I wanted to say tonight, but it's in the morning. Okay, so this morning, I would like to share the lesson that I have learned from my 17 years developing ecotourism with the local communities of West Papua. In this presentation, I will show you the strong connection between the local people and the birds, how they benefit each other. I have a company tour which specializes in bird watching called Magnificus Expedition. And I also have an NGO called Papua Konservasi dan Komunitas that helps these communities to be independent in ecotourism industry. So most of you probably know where West Papua is located. But for you who don't, West Papua is located in New Guinea Island, and is the eastern part of Indonesia. I work in 10 areas in West Papua, in Sorong, Raja Ampat, Manokwari, Arfak Mountain, Jayapura, or Sentani, and Nimbukrang, and also in Wamena, Lake Habema, Biak Island, and Numfor Island. So before ecotourism arrived or acknowledged in West Papua, the relationship between birds and local people generally included hunting birds for food by the local people. Then in 1982, there was an English birder came to Arfak Mountain. He asked the local people where can he find the birds, and he wants to see birds. So there was a local hunter. He's a very good hunter who spent his life learning the bird's behavior because he needs to hunt them to eat. He became the birder's guide at that time. So when he showed the birders the bird, the birders put on his binoculars and said thank you to him. The local guide didn't get it at that time. Wait, the local guide thought the bird is still alive, so he must have missed it. So when he tried to kill it, this is what the local guide was thinking. When he tried to kill it with his gun, so because he thought his binocular was the gun, because he hasn't known anything about binoculars at that time. So he said he must have missed it. So he wanted to throw stone to kill the birds for the birder. So the birder said, no, don't do it. I just want to see the birds. And at the end of the trip, the birder gave the local guide money to thank him. So starting from that moment, the local guide stopped hunt the birds and protect them instead. Because he learned if I keep the bird, I can get money every time I show bird to the tourists. So if I kill it, I only can eat it once. So that is one story among many stories in West Papua, how ecotourism began in West Papua. So most of local guides in West Papua were hunters, and now they are protecting the birds as local guides. They also work as porters, as cooks, as landowners, and they also as a homestay owners. So now ecotourism is really well established in West Papua. So through our NGO, we help the local people to be ready to work with tourists. So we held a training for women, for men, for youngsters, and also for the children. So we work with communities to help to prepare them to be able to take ownership of ecotourism and on their land. Why we did it separately between men by itself and women by themselves and the children, because usually they do their own part in their communities. Usually men in the village, they work as guides, and women take part as cooks and or homestay management. And children and youngsters, mostly they learn English so they can communicate with tourists and now their culture. So actually, it's very interesting when Ibu Arziana was presenting, because I remember now in West Papua, for the local people who live in the city, they sometimes don't recognize their language anymore. So their mother tongue. So they speak Bahasa Indonesia instead of their own language. So, and English will be their second language because they have to deal with the tourists. So before the pandemic, ecotourism had become significant source of income and opportunity for local people in West Papua. From my company alone, in the average year season from May to November, I would bring approximately 120 birders in 15 groups. Each of group would need guides, cooks, porters, and places to stay and places to see birds. So usually for one group, I hire 4 cooks, 2 local guides, 8 until 12 porters, and we birding in 3 to 4 locations, which involve 3 until 6 landowners and 1 until 2 places to stay. So for one cook, usually I pay 200,000 rupiah per day. And for local guide, I pay 400,000 rupiah per day. For porter per person, I pay 200,000 rupiah per day. And for landowners, I pay 250,000 rupiah per location of the birds. And for homestay, I pay usually 300,000 rupiah per person per day. So per tour, I can bring 9 until 10 million rupiah per day to the local community. Or it is equally to $700 US. So that means in 1 year season, I could bring 126,000 US dollar to one community. That's not small amount of money. In addition, the local people also have the opportunity to practice the skill that they learn in our training. Since the pandemic hit, this is what happened. No more tours. As you see here, this is my schedule in 2020 and my schedule in 2021. So every month, I receive cancellation email from my clients. So the local people have been suffering from having no tours. Unfortunately, they started to hunt the birds again because they don't have anything to eat. They have left their garden because ecotourism has been very close to them. So they don't have time to work in their garden anymore before pandemic because they were very busy to service the clients, the tourists. So now when the pandemic hits, they don't know how to do gardening anymore. So then now it's easy to kill the birds or to kill all the animals in the forest. And they also deal with logging companies now. So I'm hoping that they will remember what they learned, that conserve the birds will bring long-term benefit than kill the birds. And I hope they have patience and wisdom to continue protecting the birds and forests while the pandemic run its course. But they will have to fill their bellies, and I completely understand that. And they also have to feed their families. So, and I feel like I don't have any right to say no hunting to them. And here I am here, sitting in a nice place in Canada, and they suffer there in their village in West Papua. So the impact from the pandemic is very big in West Papua, especially for the local people who now or before the pandemic, they really, really rely on their life to tourists who come in ecotourism business. So I think that's my sharing, Ibu Ani. One more story that I always remember that I cannot forget when I was amazed how ecotourism really, really could change the people in West Papua. When we were finishing birding in the middle of the day, we were on the way back to our camp, and there was a little girl, like 6-7 years old, and she was carrying a very nice day pack. And my clients asked me, "Wow, Shita, look at that! That's beautiful day pack. Could you please ask that girl where did she get it?" And then I asked the girls, and can you imagine what the girls answered at that time? I asked her, "Where did you get your day pack?" And the girl was answering, "I got it from birds." So I was looking at her and I cried, because even the little girl, they know that if I keep birds, then I can get this day back. So actually, through those years, I've been working with the community. All the effort from the ecotourism actually really helped to keep the forest, to protect the forest. But now, since this pandemic, I am not sure whether they still can protect the birds and the forest or not. Thank you, Ibu Ani.
Thank you, Ibu Sita. That's very touching. Hopefully, all of this COVID-19 will be over, and the ecotourism in your area, in Manokwari and the surrounding, will be back to normal again. Because now we know that the ecotourism is extremely important for the local people, for their daily life, for their economic income. Thank you again, Pusita. This is real cases that we take up from our own country. Yeah? It's not from anywhere else. It is from our own country. Okay, I almost cried, Pusita, actually. Okay, Ibu dan Bapak sekalian, ladies and gentlemen, all of the distinguished speakers and participants, we finished with all of the speaker or the speech by the speaker. So for the next session, I would like to request each of the speakers can kind of wrapping up all of the questions. I know that there are so many questions, and Amel also just sent me a message that he he was kicked off from the Zoom, and some of the questions has already gone from his computer, but that's okay. You still can highlight some of important questions. So please highlight some of the important questions and then provide some answers, and basically wrapping up everything that you got. Yeah, thank you. Starting with you, Professor Boji, go ahead.
All right. So yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, if I have not answered to a question, please ask again, because I've been kicked out of the chat and I don't see the questions. So the main questions, I think, were about regulation and legislations. How can we prevent and limit the trade, and what can be done? And so here again, I mean, I don't want to say that amphibian trade or wildlife trade in general should be totally banned, because it is clearly something that is important to communities. What I think is important is to limit the trade and protect the environment if in areas where it is a requirement. So what I mean is that through another pandemic, but if we don't, clearly we need to do something about it. What can we do? The question here is, maybe we can limit the trade for some of the species that are not required for human consumptions. We can make sure that we consume only species that are consumable without risks of pathogens, and then that we stop habitat loss. And that's really the main point. It's, yes, they are protected area, yes, they are national parks, but they are very poorly implemented pretty much everywhere in the world. There are regulations, but they are not enforced. And so that's really something that we have to work on, making sure that the legislation side is clarified and implemented. The researchers in general and many people from different fields have provided the recommendations. Now it really needs to come from a governmental or regional framework, and those recommendations need to be followed. I think I've wrapped up all the questions. That should be it.
Okay, thank you, Professor Boji. Next, Pak Dwi, silahkan. Go ahead, Pak Dwi. I know that there are so many questions, so many difficult questions actually.
Thank you, Bu Ani. So I just answer one question is about the influencers. Yeah, as we know that in YouTube or other social media platforms, there are some influencers that they try to, how to say, to show their pet. Yeah, not only like how to say, cats or dogs or other pet animals, but also like exotic animals. We call it exotic animals, like snake, and then wild birds, or even tigers. Yeah, and then it raised some questions from the community. How come the influencers got that exotic animals? Are they have permit to get the, how to say, the animals, something like that? So this is the thing that actually need to, how to say, to disseminate. Yeah. So because in Indonesia actually not only how to say, not only protect the animals, or not only try to preserve the animals, but we also how to say, have ability to buy the animals for pet, or keep in home or home, something like that. But the thing that we need to consider is about the, how to say, the role of the wild animal, the wildlife. Yeah. So if you see like tigers or snakes, or even like other exotic animals where actually they will have a good contribution in the wild, then we need to consider that. Yeah, rather than we try to keep them in their house with our own permit, and then, or we have permit, but we need to always think that they will have a good role if they're still in the wild, yeah, not in our house. This is the thing that actually need to be promoted and disseminated not only by community but also with government, yeah, to make sure that even there's a permit to to keep the animals in our home, but most of the people will consider that leaving them in the wild will be the best option. Yeah. And another question that actually interesting to raise is about the dismantling organized crime, Bu Ania. So because in Indonesia actually there are two different groups of traffickers. One is organized criminal groups. They operate in the field level like poachers and local suppliers, where there's only deal with one commodity, for example, like tiger parts or elephant ivory or rhino horn. And in the high level, like financial backers or exporters, they deal with various commodities. Like they are not only trade tiger skin, but also trade rhino horn, hornbill cast, or other legal commodities. So to dismantle that levels, the authorities, they need to to use like anti-money laundering regulation, yeah, to make sure that they will able to track the financial flow from that networks. So this is the thing that I need to also to raise and also to add for the next sting operation, that are not only addressing low-level traffickers, but also addressing mid and also high-level traffickers. Yeah, I think that's all, Bu Ani, because some of the question already I already answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Dwi. Yes, I can see that lots of questions still coming to you. Feel free to answer some of them. Let's moving on. Ibu Ina, go ahead. You're wrapping up answer to all of them.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Ani. I just want all of you to understand that conservation problems usually arise from social problems. So the approach is to also involve the local communities in order to make solutions for this. And there are questions also whether we can conduct an ecological assessments with culture, social aspects, economic in one research. And yes, that should be what we should do, is we conduct an ecology research, but also at the same time, we also gather informations on the social aspects, the economic aspects also. So because one thing that we have to understand is that culture is dynamic. So if the environment has not changed, there's a possibility that the activity or the culture will not change. The culture will adapt to the changes. So actually, there was one question asking whether it can be make an input for the government regulations. Yes, because I think from telah lebih meter we can have a result whether we can know whether the language is still transmitted to the younger generations. That way we can know that whether the plants, we talk about plants here, the plants are still existing on field. And if not, we can look back whether there has been some changes. Actually, our research is also looking into that in the future, the impacts of migrations and stuff on this. So, and also there's a question whether the telah lebih meter will be applicable for other tribes. Well, the telah lebih meter, we have not built yet. It will be built next year. But looking from the concepts and the theory, it should be able to be applied. But of course, we have to make some tests first for the Gayo, and then after that, because it's just recording the sounds that the people make for this for the names of the species. So I think it should be it can be used for other tribes as well. I think that, Ibu Ani. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Arsiana. Moving on to you, Ibu Sita. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ibu. So from the first question, does the local government help ecotourism workers? Yes, they help. What I know, they give trainings to the local people on our Park Mountain in West Papua 2 times, but they didn't follow it up. So they just leave leave it like that. So the local people didn't really know what to do after that. So, and then what local people can do to attract the attention of tourists to come back to West Papua. It's quite difficult because they don't have enough facility, and they don't have enough internet connection there. So they don't really have a lot of things to do there in West Papua, unless they have a good relationship with people who have that internet or anything like that. So the same with spiritual tours. Is it possible? I don't think so, because if you want to do the spiritual tours, there is first for birders is quite difficult, because if you don't see it yourself, I don't think that's discounted, right, Ibu Ani? Because we have to see the birds by ourselves, and also it's the connection, internet connection there is not really good. So if you want to work around the forest there, most of the time you will lose the connection. And the last one, is there any obstacles at the beginning of ecotourism approach to Papua community? Yes, a lot. There were many obstacles when I started to introduce ecotourism to the local people, especially because I'm a woman, and it's still, their culture is still very strong in patriarchy culture. So, and they also don't believe, they didn't believe that ecotourism could help them. Now they believe, and they're hoping, but we don't know when this pandemic will be over and their life can be normal again. I think that's it, Ibu Ani. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu Sita. Thank you, everybody. Thank you also for all of the distinguished speakers. I'm not in a position to take we call it conclusion or something, because there are so many things to be concluded, but at least we learn something that COVID-19 is not bad. I mean, it has a not bad. COVID-19 has a lot and huge impact on many things, including for the wildlife conservation, for wildlife trade, and for also for communication, daily communication, like Bu Arziana mentioned also. Oh, sorry, for Ibu Arziana, it's a good sign, right? So everybody stay at home, and it increase the communication using the local language. But for Ibu Sita, it's not good at all, because it stop all of the ecotourism activities. Okay, let's ladies and gentlemen, let's join myself to congratulate all of them with the thanks, and thank you so much for all of the good speakers with their excellent speech, and hopefully we can see each other again in the future. And apologize for inconvenience if there any during this session. And our next session would be fun things that lead by Camilla. But again, let's continue. Sorry, banyak salah saya ngomong nih. Let's give thanks and give a big applause to all of the speakers. It's noon already. Maybe I'm already hungry. So big applause to all of the speakers. And back to you, Camilla. Camilla? Yes, Camilla.
All right. Thank you, Professor Hani.
Okay, sorry.
Hello?
Okay, go ahead.
All right. All right. Thank you, Professor Hani. It is such a fruitful discussion, right? With our distinguished speakers and also the moderator, of course. So, before we move on to the next agenda, there is an appreciation from the committee that will be given by Dr. Dede Aulia Rahman to our outstanding speakers, and not to mention to our moderator also. So to Dr. Dede, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Camila. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon and good health to you all. Thank you for your guidance this event. So nice, Mrs. Camila, and also thanks to Prof. Ani for your willingness to guide the presentation and discussion in the webinar. On behalf of the webinar committee, allow me to express my deepest appreciation for our standing speaker, Prof. Amel Borje, Mr. Dwi Adiasto, Dr. Ajana Sungkar, and also Ms. Valentina Sita Prativi. Your presence in the webinar is honor for us. Hopefully, this collaboration not only stop here, but also continue in the future. Well, let me convey a little memento as from appreciate from us. Please, the committee can display the award certificate. The first from Prof. Amel Borje. Okay, this year. Thank you, Prof. Amel, for your willingness to join this webinar. Okay, second from Mr. Dwi Adiasto. Okay, thank you, Mr. Dwi Adiasto, for your willingness to join in this webinar. Hopefully, we can collaborate in the future. The third for Dr. Ajana Sungkar. Thank you, Buina.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the last for Ms. Valentina Sita Prativi. Thank you, Ms. Valentina.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, the last one for our outstanding moderator, Prof. Ani Mariasuti. Please, the committee can show the certificate for Prof. Ani. Thank you, Prof. Ani.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, as the committee, once again, I want to say thank to you all. Okay, I return this event to Ms. Camila again. Please, Ms. Camila.
All right, thank you, Dr. Dede, for the certificate of appreciations. All right, here we are. There is a session that we were waiting for also, which is, this is a door prize announcement before the closing. So kindly stay and watch your name to be mentioned by me. So the door prize will be given to the participant who actively participate in this webinar, as I mentioned before. I will read the name of the participant who win the door prize. For the participant whom I mentioned, please raise your hand. I will call your name 3 times, and if there is no response after that, I will directly replace it to the next winner. So
Camila, your voice is breaking up.
Here is the name of the winner. There are, oh, I'm so sorry. Am I audible now?
Yes, now it's good again. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. Maybe I will continue to read the participant who won the door prize. Okay, the first name is Miss Nur Afikah Idrus. Are you here? Miss Nur Afikah Idrus. Please your hand if you are present in this Zoom. Miss Nur Afikah Idrus. All right, apparently, if I search a name, it is here, but not yet give the reaction. Oh, all right, Miss Nur Afikah Idrus is here, okay. Congratulations. Okay, next. Okay, the next name is Mr. Deden Mudiana. Please raise your hand if you may post. Right. All right, Mr. Deden Mudiana. Oh, all right. Mr. Deden Mudiana is present. Okay. Move on to the next name. Miss Hina Amin. Miss Hina Amin. Are you here? Please give some reaction or something that I can. Miss Hina Amin. All right. Miss Hina Amin. Miss Hina Amin. Okay, maybe we can move on to the next winner, which is Dewi Ria Rahmawati. Are you here? Please give some reaction. Once again, Dewi Ria Rahmawati. Okay, right. Last call. Dewi Ria Rahmawati. Here, please give reaction. All right. Apparently, Dewi is not give the reaction, so let's move on to the next. Oh, Faris Budiman. All right. Oh, Dewi Rahmawati is present. She already gave the reaction, so move on to the next winner, which is Astiria. All right. Miss Asti. Okay, Miss Asti, are you here? Miss Asti is open the camera, but not giving any reaction. Maybe, okay, Miss Asti is present because camera is already open. All right, thank you. Next is Mr. Faris Budiman, who already raised the hand before. All right, thank you. All right, move on to the next winner, which is Yasinta Salim. Yasinta Salim, are you here? Please raise your hand. All right, Yasinta Salim. Next is Dwi Warni. Miss Dwi Warni. Miss Dwi Warni, are you here? All right, once again, Miss Dwi Warni. Okay, apparently Miss Dwi Warni has not give the reaction yet. So let's move on. Syahli Raihan Najib, are you here? Syahli? Here we are. We can see the name of the winners. So if you see your name in this screen, kindly raise your hand so we could not tease you, because those who give the reaction will have the prize. All right. Okay. After Dwi Warni, Syahli is present. All right. Okay. Next to Rimba Basuki. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Oh, Rahma. All right. My bad. Oops. Sorry, Rahma Fitriani. All right. Rahma Fitriani is present. And Rimba Basuki, are you here? Oh, all right. I can see your hand. Rimba Basuki is present. And also Mr. Tri Haryoko. Mr. Tri Haryoko. All right. Mr. Tri Haryoko is here also. Mr. Faris Budiman is already mentioned before. Okay. Okay. I've already mentioned 12 name, I believe, which is, okay, I will state the name again to make sure the name of the participant is right, which is, the first is Ms. Nur Afika Idrus, the second is Mr. Deden Mudiana, the third is Ms. Asti Endarianti, the fourth is Faris Budiman, The fifth is Yasinta. The sixth is Miss Dwi Warni, and 7 is Syahli. 8 is Rahma Fitri. 9 is Rimba Basuki. 10 is Mr. Triharyoko. And before there are a name that hasn't given the reaction yet, which is Hina Amin and Ria Rahmawati Dewi. Dewi Ria Rahmawati, I'm sorry. All right, apparently we already have 10 winner who get the door prize. For the committee, is it enough, or we need to add 5 names again? Oh,
Camila,
all right.
maybe you can mention what are the door prizes?
All right. As you can see in the screen, you can see the door prizes, which is there are books that you can read, and also I couldn't see the title very clear, but I believe it will be a very good book, and this is your door prize, yeah. So congratulations for the 10 winner. Oh, all right. For the additional winner, because there is a name that hasn't give the reaction yet, so we add the winner. The first additional winner is Mr. Ditro Wibisono. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. The next is Mr. Alexander Kurniawan. You here? Mr. Alexander Kurniawan. Apparently, all right. I can see your hand. Okay. Thank you. Okay. After that, there is Mr. Ahmad Saleh. Are you here? Okay. Mr. Ahmad Saleh. Wait a minute. Mr. Ahmad Saleh, if I search a name, is here but not giving the reaction yet. So I will call the name last time. Mr. Ahmad Saleh, are you here? All right, maybe Mr. Ahmad Saleh is not present here. So the additional winner will be Mr. Ditro Wibisono and also Mr. Alexander Kurniawan. So we will have 12 winner here. Is that enough for the committee, or we need 3 additional winner?
I think enough, Camila.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. If it is enough, then here is the winner. And for the winner, for the participant who get the prize, as I mentioned before, will be contacted by the committee. So just stay tuned and wait for your door prize to be sent. Congratulations for all of you. Okay. All right, after the door prize session, here we are at the end of this webinar. Okay, to close this webinar, let's say Hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. On behalf of the committee, I would like to say thank you for joining this webinar. And I am Kamila Nurdi Tarwana. See you in the next occasion. Thank you very much, everyone. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, I will also remind you for the attendance form, you can scan here or just type this link in the website, or just enter this link so that you can have the attendance list, because it is a requirement to make sure that you have the e-certificate. So don't forget to fill in the attendance form. Okay.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.
ala jerengkau mendaki jalan bila hati tidak mampu awal kaki hayati langkah kalau sambil tentang dia mundur dan maju. Melenggang patah-patah, kenapa goyang pincak-pincak, kenapa bodi bocor-bocor. Pegang-pegang lebih dan ada
Dari tadi saya bilang, ini kok peserta nggak keluar-keluar.
Tapi udah di stop record kan ya, aduh. Pekel ternyata ngeklik, Mas Arief ngeklik, saya ngeklik, jadi lari-lari gitu loh yang diklik.
Iya, saya bilang, aduh ini jangan-jangan panitia saya in the waiting room. Ya, oke, kita cuma bersisa 7 orang ya. Ya, nggak ada.
Udah di Bali kayaknya Bu Eva.
Ya, Mbak Eva udah di Bali, jadi beliau hanya memantau. Dari kemarin katanya izin karena kemungkinan lagi di jalan nggak bisa ikutan gitu. Baik, terima kasih semua hatur nuhun Mas Ahib, Mbak Fitri yang sekarang saya panggil Mbak Fitri, Bu Ina, Mbak Kamila tentunya, Mbak Eva yang lagi di sana, semoga sukses. Alhamdulillah udah beres nih, tinggal nanti mungkin saya akan komunikasi dengan Mas Topo ya kaitan dengan door prize. Jadi nanti beliau yang akan kirimkan. Tadi kan hanya ada berapa? Kamila 13 ya? 13 sih?
12 Pak, ya.
12, nggak apa-apa, jadi hemat juga anggaran kita. Soalnya Pak Kadep kemarin, ini kok gede banget sampai 6 juta. Bilang kan shippingnya nggak tahu, tapi kalau ke Papua semua kan mahal Pak, saya bilang gitu kan. Terus tentunya untuk narasumber saya nggak tahu Bu In ada honornya atau enggak. Seharusnya sih ada. Saya udah minta ke Pak Kadep ya.
Nggak usah.
Kalau Bu Ina nggak mau buat saya.
Kan
nggak bercanda Bu Ina.
Buat tim.
Siap, nanti kita syukuran buat tim aja kalau gitu.
Pending ya. buat rapat penutupan ya.
Rapat penutupan ini maksudnya.
Nggak ada penutupan.
Pembubaran panitia. Dibubarkan.
Panitia. Nah,